Delivered as merchandise, she believed she had lost all value. But what began as imposition became a transformation that no one would dare predict. The destiny of the tribe and hers would never be the same. Subscribe to the channel and discover how this story reinvented itself. She arrived covered in red dust, the kind that marks the northeastern backlands like a scar. Her bare feet no longer felt the hot ground, calloused as they were by her hard life. Vittoria, not quite 23 years old, was brought tied to the back of an old cart, exchanged for 4 skinny goats and a barrel of manioc flour. The men called her the Drought for never having borne a child, despite 2 arranged marriages that ended in early widowhood. Her face, marked by the sun, had still eyes the color of honey that no longer saw hope. Her father, Antonio, broken by 5 years of drought and the shame of having a daughter without purpose, agreed to hand her over to Joaquim do Nascimento, a widowed caboclo of 40 who lived in the Quilombola community of Serrote de Boa Vista, in the interior of Bahia. "Take her. She's no use to me anymore," said the old man as he counted the sacks he had received in exchange. On that late afternoon in 1947, when the drought was already announcing its merciless return, Vittoria was left like someone abandoning a burden too heavy to carry. The community observed in silence, children hidden behind their mothers' skirts, the elders with lowered heads. Joaquim had not chosen her of his own will. He accepted the agreement like someone accepting the last drop of water before crossing the desert. What he sought was peace with the region's farmers, who had been pressuring the community's lands for decades. A widower for 4 years, Joaquim had lost his wife and daughter to measles that swept through the region. Since then, he had cared for the community's sick, knowledgeable in herbs and prayers that eased the ailments of body and soul. He always walked with his head down, as if carrying the weight of the world on his broad, dark shoulders. "Come," was the only word he said to Vittoria in that first meeting. She followed him silently to a simple mud house, covered with straw, on the edge of the community. At first, Vittoria remained lying on the straw mat offered to her for days. She refused food, distrusted everything. She slept with clenched fists, as if she still needed to defend herself. The community women observed her with narrowed eyes. Too white, too thin, too barren, they whispered among themselves. "She won't survive the first winter," some bet. "She'll run away before the next moon," others guaranteed. Joaquim, however, never treated her with rudeness. The silence between them was like a dry river, deep but without life. She observed him when he returned from the woods with herbs tied in bundles, how he washed his hands 3 times before preparing tea for a feverish child, how he sat alone, at night, watching the stars and speaking words she did not understand. The language of pain, however, Vittoria knew well. She saw in his gestures the same emptiness she carried within herself. Gradually, she began to move around the house. She washed his clothes in silence. She cleaned the packed earth floor. She learned to light the wood stove on cold mornings. One night, when he returned late, he found a plate of manioc porridge with dried fish waiting for him. He did not thank her, but he ate everything. It was the first gesture of acceptance. The community was made up of descendants of runaway slaves and indigenous people who had resisted for generations in that forgotten piece of the backlands. The mud houses were scattered in a circle around a centennial tree, a giant umbu tree that, even in drought, offered shade and fruits. It was there that the elders gathered to make decisions, that the children played, that rituals took place. Vittoria observed everything from a distance, like someone spying on a world to which she didn't belong. Donna Celestina, the community's oldest midwife, was the first to look her in the eyes. "Come here, girl. Help the old woman separate these herbs." It was a dry invitation, but one that opened the first door. With trembling hands, Vittoria began to help. She recognized some plants: rosemary, anise, lemongrass. Others were new to her. "This one here is catuaba, good for weak men. This is arera, heals bad wounds," the elder explained with patience. When asked where she had learned about herbs, Vittoria replied only, "From my grandmother, before she passed." The first real crack in the wall that separated her from those people happened on a new moon dawn. Desperate screams cut through the night silence. Nade, a 16-year-old girl, had been in complicated labor for more than 12 hours. The child was coming breech, the midwife said. The mother was bleeding heavily. The prayer women had already lit candles for all the known saints. That's when Vittoria, awakened by the screams, entered the house where the young woman suffered. Without asking permission, she boiled water, asked for honey, and prepared an herbal infusion that she took from a small bag hidden among her few clothes. "Make her drink this," she ordered Donna Celestina, who hesitated for a moment before obeying. Then, with firm hands, she pressed specific points on the laboring woman's belly, whispering words that no one understood. Half an hour later, the cry of a strong boy broke the tension. When the placenta came out whole and the bleeding decreased, everyone looked at Vittoria with astonishment. Donna Celestina hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "You have hands of light, girl," she said, and it was enough for something inside Vittoria to begin to thaw. Joachim observed everything from the door, in silence. That morning, when she returned home exhausted, she found a small bunch of wildflowers on her mat. It was the first gift, and it was enough for her to begin to believe that perhaps she could stay. In the days that followed, some women began to seek her out discreetly, asking about teas for pain, herbs for children's fevers. She responded with simple gestures, economizing words like someone saving water in drought time. She learned some words in the ancient language, still spoken by the elders. She studied the women's gestures when they pounded corn, when they wove straw, when they sang to lull babies to sleep. Gradually, distrust gave way to cautious curiosity, but not everyone accepted her presence with the same openness. Raphael, a 16-year-old orphan and Joachim's nephew, watched her with eyes full of resentment. For him, Vittoria was the foreigner who steals what isn't hers. Born from a difficult birth that took his mother, Raphael grew up hearing stories about how a white midwife from a neighboring farm refused to attend to his mother for being too black. The pain of this rejection grew with him, becoming a silent hatred for everything that came from outside. When he saw Vittoria being sought out by the community women, he spat on the ground and walked away. "Uncle Joachim is getting old and foolish," he told the other young people. "He let this drought woman enter our lands, and now she will suck our strength as all whites do." Even in the face of this hostility, Vittoria never responded with harshness. She left small offerings in the young man's path, a piece of rapadura, raw sugar, a carved wooden knife, a cord of colored seeds, without ever admitting she was the one who left them. Raphael threw everything away, but over time he began to examine the objects before discarding them. The bond between Vittoria and Joachim grew slowly, like a plant from the sertong, resilient, without fanfare. She noticed that he suffered from back pain after days of gathering herbs. She began to prepare poultices of mud and leaves that she left beside his mat. He noticed that she shivered on cold nights and began to leave a sheep's wool blanket at her feet before sleeping. They didn't sleep together, didn't exchange caresses, but the gestures of care spoke more than words. One morning, while washing clothes in the nearly dry stream, Vittoria felt a presence. It was a 5-year-old girl, Maria Zina, Donna Celestina's granddaughter, who watched her with large, curious eyes. "Is it true that you fell from the sky?" the little one asked with the innocence of children. Vittoria smiled for the first time since she arrived. "No, little one. I just walked here from very far away." The girl came closer. "Then why is your skin the color of the moon?" Vittoria thought a bit before answering. "Because everyone has the color of the land they came from. You have the color of the strong sun, I have the color of the full moon, but inside we are made of the same clay." The girl smiled, satisfied, and extended her hand to touch Vittoria's straight, dark hair. It was the first gentle touch she received in that community. And it was through the children that she began to find her place. The first rains arrived late that year, but when they came, they transformed everything. The sertong resurrected in colors that Vittoria never imagined could exist in such a punished land. Purple and yellow flowers sprouted among stones, frogs sang in puddles of water, children ran with bare feet in the mud. It was during this rebirth that Mr. Zeffirino, the oldest resident of Cerote da Boa Vista, fell ill with a fever that no tea could reduce. The old man of almost 90 years was the guardian of the community's stories, knowledgeable in the secrets of the earth and sky. His loss would be like losing the very memory of the place. For 3 days, Joaquim and the prayer women took turns at his side without success. At dawn on the 4th day, when the old man was already breathing with difficulty, Vittoria asked permission to enter. In silence, she prepared a dark paste with herbs that no one recognized. "What is this? Woman?" asked Donna Celestina, suspicious. "Medicine from my people," replied Vittoria, as she spread the mixture on the sick man's chest and the soles of his feet. Then she burned dried leaves in the room, making an aromatic smoke that facilitated breathing. Throughout the night she stayed by Seu Zeffirino's side, moistening his lips with green coconut water, whispering words in his ear. When the sun rose, the fever had subsided. The old man opened his eyes and asked for corn porridge. The astonishment was general. "This girl has a deal with souls," said Donna Celestina, impressed. "Or with the devil," murmured Raphael, who observed everything from a distance. But not even he could deny that Seu Zeffirino was alive, thanks to the one they called a foreigner. From that day on, Vittoria began to be sought not only by women, but also by men and children who needed care. Her knowledge about herbs, combined with what she learned from the community's elders, created cures that surprised everyone. She learned the language of the ancients more fluently, memorized healing chants, learned the secrets of the moon's cycles and their influence on plants and bodies. She was no longer the silent woman of the first days. With Maria Zina always by her side, Vittoria began to teach the children how to recognize medicinal plants, how to prepare poultices for wounds, how to respect the cycles of nature. The girl, who had lost her mother as a baby, found in Vittoria a maternal figure she never had. "Aunt Vittoria," she called her with affection, while helping to separate seeds or sift dried roots. The relationship between Vittoria and Joaquim also transformed with the rains. One afternoon, as they worked together planting a medicinal garden behind the house, their fingers touched while placing a basil seedling in the ground. It was a brief, accidental touch, but enough for both to feel a different warmth rise through their bodies. That night, for the first time, he sat beside her to eat. "You have good hands," he said, breaking the habitual silence. "The earth likes them." Vittoria lowered her eyes, feeling her face burn. "I learned from my grandmother that the earth is like people. It needs respect and affection to give its best," she replied in a low voice. It was the beginning of conversations that gradually extended through the nights, illuminated only by the oil lamp's light. He told about the community's history, about the struggles to keep the land, about the wife who had departed taking a piece of him. She spoke of childhood in the harsh backlands, of the grandmother who knew the power of plants, of the pains that life had given her, and that taught her to heal the pains of others. One night, after helping with the difficult birth of Seu Toninho's goat, Vittoria returned home exhausted. She found Joaquim waiting with a basin of warm water and herbs for her to wash her hands. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. That night, for the first time, she slept beside him, not as woman and man, but as two tired souls who found comfort in each other's presence. Vittoria's acceptance in the community grew like plants after the rain, but Raphael's distrust remained, fueled by a new fear. The deadline given by the farmers was running out. Almost a year ago, when they accepted the peace agreement, the powerful in the region had given the community the deadline of one harvest to present land documents or be evicted. Most families had lived there for generations, but the papers were lost in time or never existed. The deadline would end at the next full moon, 15 days from now. Fear hung over Cerote da Boa Vista like a dark cloud. "It's her fault," Raphael told the young people who followed him. "Since this drought woman arrived, misfortune stalks us more closely. It was a bad sign to accept the whites' agreement." His followers agreed, remembering that Vittoria had arrived, along with the temporary peace agreement. To make matters worse, a child fell seriously ill 3 days later. It was Luizinho, son of Jurema, one of the most respected women in the community. The 3-year-old boy burned with fever, with red spots on his body. Vittoria and Joaquim took turns caring for him, but nothing seemed to work. On the 5th day of fever, when despair had already taken hold of everyone, Jurema sought out Vittoria in tears. "Save my son," she begged, kneeling before her. "Do whatever. Say is necessary, but don't let my boy go." With a heavy heart, Vittoria prepared an herbal bath and asked for native bee honey and mud from the riverbed. She made a mixture that covered the child's entire body, leaving only the face exposed. "Now we need to wait and pray," she told Jurema, who didn't leave her son's side for a minute. Raphael observed everything with distrustful eyes. When night came and the boy's fever hadn't broken, he gathered a group of young people. "You see, the white woman is letting the boy die just as they did with my mother. They don't care about our people." Fear and anger spread like fire in dry straw. At dawn, when everyone was sleeping, Raphael and 3 other young men entered Vittoria and Joaquim's house. They found her sleeping alone, as Joaquim was at Jurema's house taking care of the sick boy. They dragged her out, covering her mouth so she couldn't scream. They took her to the riverbank where they tied her to a tree. "You have until dawn to confess that you came here to bewitch us and hand over our lands to the farmers," Raphael threatened, with a knife pressed against her neck. "If you don't confess, you'll be thrown in the river with stones at your feet." Vittoria, trembling with fear and cold, looked into the young man's eyes. "Raphael, I know you hate me because a white woman let your mother die. I feel that pain with you, but I'm not that woman. I have no power over life and death. I just try to help as I can." The young man hesitated for a moment, but anger was stronger. "Lies! All whites lie. Because of you, we'll lose our lands in 15 days. The discussion was interrupted by shouts coming from the village. It was Joaquim, who had discovered Vittoria's disappearance and was gathering men to search for her. While the other young people fled, Raphael remained paralyzed, the knife still in his hand. "Go ahead, kill me," Vittoria challenged. "But first, let me tell you something my grandmother taught me. Hatred is like poison that we drink expecting the other to die." Before Raphael could respond, they heard a cry of joy coming from the village. It was Jurema announcing that Luizinho's fever had broken and that the boy was saved. Vittoria's treatment had worked. Confused and ashamed, Raphael lowered the knife. Joaquim and the other men arrived at the riverbank at that moment. Seeing Vittoria tied up and Raphael with a knife, Joaquim advanced furiously on his nephew. "Stop!" Vittoria shouted with a strength no one knew she possessed. "He didn't hurt me, we were talking." Joaquim looked incredulously at her, then at his trembling nephew. With quick gestures he untied Vittoria and hugged her tightly. It was their first embrace, witnessed by the almost full moon and Raphael's frightened eyes. Back at the village, they found an unexpected scene. Luizinho, still weak but no longer feverish, was sitting on his mother's lap drinking chicken broth. The spots on his body were beginning to disappear. When he saw Vittoria, the boy smiled and extended his little arms to her. "Thank you," said Jurema with tears in her eyes. "You brought my son back." That night marked a turning point. The next morning, Raphael appeared at the door of Vittoria and Joaquim's house. He was alone, head bowed. "I came to ask forgiveness," he said with a trembling voice, "and I came to say that maybe you can help us with the land documents." Vittoria invited him in. Together with Joaquim, they talked about the approaching deadline, about the fear of losing everything, about the need to find a solution. "My grandmother used to say that for every problem, nature offers a plant. For every pain, a remedy. We'll find a remedy for this pain too," promised Vittoria, holding Raphael's hands between hers. That same day, she asked to see the few documents that the community possessed. They were yellowed papers, some torn, others stained with moisture. Manumission letters of freed slaves, baptism records, an old hand-drawn map. Nothing that legally proved land ownership. While examining the documents by the light of an oil lamp, Vittoria noticed something strange in one of the oldest papers. It was a letter written in archaic Portuguese, dated 1832, addressed to a certain Community of the Free of Cerote. Looking more closely, she noticed an almost invisible watermark, the imperial coat of arms. "This could be important," she murmured to Joachim, who was watching attentively. "We need someone who understands ancient laws." The name of Father Genesio emerged as a possibility. The old priest lived in the nearest town, a day's walk away. He was known for his knowledge of history and his sympathy for the causes of the poorest. "I'll fetch the priest tomorrow," Joachim decided, "and you, Raphael, will come with me." The young man nodded, feeling for the first time that he could be useful in his people's struggle. That night, as the community gathered around the fire to discuss the next steps, Vittoria watched the dancing flames. She realized that in a few months that place had become her home, those people, her family. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel dry inside. On the contrary, she felt like the Certain land after the first rains, being reborn, flowering, finding strength where before there was only aridity. When Joachim sat beside her and silently placed his hand over hers, she knew she was no longer alone on this journey. The waxing moon illuminated the starry sky, announcing that time was short and that the true challenge was yet to come. The sun had barely risen when Joachim and Raphael left in search of Father Genesio. They carried the ancient letter carefully stored between banana leaves to protect it from moisture, as well as a small bundle with flour, rapadura, and water. Before they departed, Vittoria tied a bracelet of red seeds on each of their wrists. "For protection on the road," she said, touching Joachim's face with a delicacy that surprised them both. Raphael observed the gesture, and for the first time felt no anger. At the camp, the countdown was felt in every breath. 12 days. That was the time left until the farmers would come with armed men and official papers to evict everyone. 12 days to save the home of generations. Joachim's absence placed Vittoria in a position of greater responsibility. Since he was the main healer, people now came directly to her. That morning, shortly after the men's departure, an emergency arose. Seu Zefferino, who seemed recovered, had a relapse. This time, it wasn't fever, but an acute chest pain that left him breathless. Vittoria rushed to the old man's house with her small bag of herbs. She found him pale, breathing with difficulty, clutching the left side of his chest tightly. "His heart is tired," explained Donna Celestina, concerned. "He's lived a long time, seen much struggle." Vittoria knew she needed to act quickly. She prepared a strong tea of lemon balm with rosemary and honey. While the old man slowly drank, she massaged his feet with copaiba oil. Gradually, his breathing normalized. When he finally fell asleep, Vittoria left the house exhausted, finding a group of people waiting for news. "He will be fine for now," she said, "but we need to care for him day and night." It was there, faced with those people's genuine concern, for one of their own, that Vittoria fully felt the meaning of community. She had never experienced this before, people united not by obligation or fear, but by bonds of affection and shared history. While organizing shifts to watch over Sue Zefferino, Vittoria noticed Maria Zina observing everything with attentive eyes. The girl approached holding a small package. "Aunt Vittoria, I found this buried near the old umbu tree," she said, extending the object. It was a small carved wooden box, the size of a hand, covered with earth. Intrigued, Vittoria opened the small chest. Inside, there was an ancient rosary of seeds, a lock of hair tied with a red ribbon, and a small notebook with a leather cover. The yellowed pages contained delicate calligraphy in archaic Portuguese, interspersed with words that Vittoria did not recognize. It seemed like a mixture of Latin with something more primitive. Leafing through carefully, she realized it was a diary of herbs and cures, written by a woman named Esperanza, dated 1836. "Where exactly did you find this, little one?" asked Vittoria, feeling that this find could be important. "The umbu tree showed me," replied the girl with the simplicity of children. "I was playing at hiding treasures, and it spoke to me." Vittoria smiled, understanding that childish imagination often touched truths that adults could not reach. In the following nights, while the community slept, Vittoria studied the diary by candlelight. She discovered that Esperanza had been a white woman who came to that community under circumstances similar to hers, brought against her will, considered worthless for not being able to have children. In the pages, she described how she learned the medicine of the freed slaves and indigenous people who formed the Quilombo, how she found a place among them, how she helped the community survive epidemics and droughts. In a specific passage, dated January 1841, Esperanza mentioned a meeting with the young emperor during a journey of his through the backlands. Today, His Majesty granted us the deed of possession of these lands in recognition of the services provided by the men from here during the Cabanos War. The document was delivered to the Council of Elders and registered in the book of the chapel of St. Anthony, she wrote. Vittoria felt her heart race. It was the proof they needed. If they could find this record in the chapel book, they would have a way to prove legitimate ownership of the lands. But where would the mentioned chapel? Cerrota da Boa Vista did not have its own church. People traveled to the nearest town for religious services. On the morning of the 5th day after Joaquim and Raphael's departure, Vittoria sought out Donna Celestina. The old midwife was the living memory of the community. If anyone knew about an ancient chapel, it would be her. "Chapel of St. Anthony," repeated the elder, furrowing her wrinkled brow. "That was before my time. But my grandmother spoke of a small church that stood on top of the ridge before the great drought of 1877. They say it was destroyed and never rebuilt." "And the objects, the books?" insisted Vittoria anxiously. Donna Celestina closed her eyes, as if searching for distant memories. "There was a chest," she finally murmured. "A large chest of dark wood with metal clasps. The ancients hid it when the Cangacheros bandits passed through here. It must be in the cave of the Split Rock." The cave was a 2-hour walk away at the highest point of the ridge that gave the community its name. It was a place avoided by most, considered home to ancient souls. Vittoria knew she couldn't wait for Joaquim's return. Only 8 days remained until the final deadline. That same afternoon, she gathered a small group, herself Jurema, who insisted on accompanying her as a form of gratitude for saving her son, and 2 strong young men to carry whatever they found. Maria Xenia begged to go along, but Vittoria convinced her to stay and help care for Seu Zeferino. The climb was difficult. The merciless sun punished the group's backs, and the Caatinga's thorns scratched their legs. When they finally reached the cave entrance, the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky orange and red. The cave's mouth was a narrow crack in the rock, partially covered by dry vegetation. "They say only those the cave allows can enter," whispered one of the young men, visibly nervous. Vittoria took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. If they didn't find the chest, the community would lose everything. "Let's light the torches and enter. Stay together," she directed, taking the lead. The cave's interior was surprisingly cool and damp. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone fingers, and the irregular ground demanded attention with each step. They advanced slowly, illuminating the path with improvised torches. After about 15 minutes, they reached a wider chamber. There, leaning against the farthest wall, was a chest exactly as Donna Celestina had described. Dark wood, large metal clasps, engravings worn by time. "We found it," exclaimed Jurema, emotional. But the joy was short-lived. The chest was locked, with an old rusty padlock. "Let's take it as it is," decided Vittoria. "We'll find a way to open it in the village." With effort, the 2 young men managed to carry the heavy chest out of the cave. The descent was even more difficult than the ascent, especially with that weight. When they finally reached the village, it was already late night. They were received with exclamations of astonishment and hope. The chest was placed in the center of the yard under the umbu tree, and everyone gathered around. Several attempts were made to open the padlock. Knives, stones, even an improvised chisel. Nothing worked. "We need proper tools," concluded one of the men, "or wait for Joaquim to return." "We don't have time," replied Vittoria thoughtfully. It was then that Maria Xenia approached, holding something in her hand. "Aunt Vittoria, this was inside the box I found. It was hidden in a corner." It was a small bronze key, darkened by time. With trembling hands, Vittoria took the key and fitted it into the padlock. She turned it slowly, fearing it would break. After a moment of resistance, a click was heard. The padlock opened. A collective sigh went through the crowd. Inside the chest, protected by a waxed cloth, were various objects: a silver chalice, religious vestments, some carved wooden images of saints, and at the bottom, 2 large, leather-bound books. One of them was clearly an ecclesiastical registry book. Vittoria opened it carefully. The fragile pages contained records of baptisms, marriages, and deaths, dating from 1820. Carefully turning pages, she reached the year 1841, and there it was, on the page dated January 17th, the record of the imperial visit and the complete transcription of the donation letter of the lands to the community of the Free of Cerote da Boa Vista, with the signature of Emperor Dom Pedro II himself, then only 15 years old. "This is what we needed," exclaimed Jurema, embracing Vittoria tightly. "Now they can't take us from here." The celebration was interrupted by a shout. One of the sentinels warned that horsemen were approaching. Everyone tensed, fearing they were the farmers' men advancing the deadline. But soon they recognized the silhouettes of Joachim and Raphael, accompanied by a third man, Father Genesio. The 3 arrived exhausted, covered in dust, but with expressions of triumph. They had found in the diocese archives a copy of the same donation letter that had just been discovered in the chest. The reunion of Vittoria and Joachim was emotional. Without caring about the looks, he hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "I thought of you with every step of the way," he whispered in her ear. "And I felt your presence every moment," she replied, allowing herself, for the first time, to openly express her feelings. Raphael observed the scene with new understanding. He approached Vittoria and, in a surprising gesture, extended his hand to her. "Thank you for not giving up on us." "On me," he said with a choked voice. "My mother would be proud to see our land protected." Father Genesio, a man with white hair and vivid eyes, examined the found documents with growing excitement. "This is extraordinary," he declared, adjusting his glasses over his thin nose. "It not only proves your right to the land, but has inestimable historical value. It's one of the few known records of direct land donation to a Quilombola community by the emperor himself." In the following days, the priest helped the community prepare a legal defense. The registry book and the original letter were carefully preserved, and authenticated copies were made. A lawyer friend of the priest, sympathetic to the cause of the poorest, agreed to represent the community without charging fees. When the marked day finally arrived, the farmers appeared accompanied by armed henchmen and a justice official. They expected to find a frightened community, ready to be evicted. Instead, they were received by an organized group, led by Joachim, Raphael, Vittoria, and Father Genesio, who presented legal documents proving land ownership. These lands legitimately belonged to the Quilombola community of Cerote da Boa Vista, by imperial decree since 1841, declared the priest with authority. Any eviction attempt will constitute a crime against a historical document and national heritage. The justice official, after examining the documents, confirmed their authenticity. The farmers, frustrated, threatened to appeal to higher instances, but they knew they had lost that battle. When the invaders finally departed, a wave of relief and joy swept through the community. For the first time in generations, they felt truly secure in their own land. That night, under the centennial umbu tree, a great celebration took place. Drums resonated, people danced, children ran happily. At the center of it all was Vittoria, no longer the foreigner, no longer the drought woman, but an integral part of that people and that land. When the full moon illuminated the yard, Joachim pulled her to a quieter corner. From a small package, he took out a necklace of colorful seeds carved with traditional symbols of the community. "This belonged to my mother, and before her, to her mother's mother," he explained, placing the necklace around Vittoria's neck. "It is given only to those who are guardians of life." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I can never bear children. I'm dry inside," she murmured. Joachim held her face between his calloused hands. "Vittoria, you have brought life to this land in ways that go beyond the womb. The children you care for, the plants you cultivate, the hope you planted in all of us, this too is generating life." It was then that, for the first time, their lips met in a gentle kiss full of promises. And it was thus, under the starry sky of the Sertão, that Vittoria finally understood the words of her grandmother, whispered so many years before. "It is not the womb that makes a mother, but the constancy of caring." 5 winters after the victory against the farmers, the mud house where Vittoria had arrived as an unwanted burden had transformed into the House of Stars, a healing space that attracted people from all over the region. Vittoria, now affectionately called Vitalina, had married Joachim under the centennial umbu tree. Although her womb remained infertile, she was a mother in many ways, having adopted Maria Zina after Donna Celestina's passing. The girl, now 10 years old, showed the same gift for healing as her adoptive mother. Raphael, once her fierce opponent, had become her most dedicated apprentice. "You transformed my hatred into purpose," he told her once. "You taught me that the bitterest roots can produce the best medicines." The fame of the House of Stars crossed borders. Vittoria received everyone with equal respect, regardless of origin. "Pain knows no distinction," she would say, "and knowledge only grows when shared." In 1954, researchers from the capital arrived at Cerote de Boa Vista. They proposed a partnership between the community and the university, with recognition of intellectual rights over the formulas developed there. The Council of Elders was divided. "They've already taken our land, gold timber," argued Seu Antonino. "Now they want our knowledge." It was Vittoria who proposed a solution. They would accept the partnership with clear conditions. The knowledge would be shared, not ceded, and part of the benefits would return to the community. "We cannot live in isolation," she argued, "but we can choose how we relate to the world." The proposal was accepted, and a historic agreement was signed. It was then that a new threat emerged: drought. The year 1955 began without rain. "It will be like the one in 1915, predicted Seu Zeferino. "The rivers will dry up, the cattle will fall in the pastures, and hunger will knock on every door." The community prepared, but the main well began to lower, and the water became murky. That's when Vittoria remembered something in Esperanza's diary. "During the drought of 1837, we followed the flight of the blackbirds to a hidden spring in the rocks on the north side of the ridge. An expedition was organized. Vittoria, Joachim, Raphael, and others. After hours of searching, they found a crack between rocks. Vittoria, being the smallest, ventured through the narrow passage. Inside, she discovered a small natural pool of crystal-clear water. "It's an underground spring," explained Dr. Helena, who accompanied them, "fed by an aquifer that doesn't dry up even during droughts." To bring water to the community, Joachim proposed building bamboo gutters. Everyone mobilized for the work, and in 2 weeks, the system was ready. When the first water arrived, it was celebrated as a gift. "It's a miracle," some said. "It's ancestral knowledge," corrected Vittoria. "It's Esperanza's wisdom, reaching us through time." That simple system allowed Cerote da Boa Vista to survive the Great Drought of 1955-1956, which devastated neighboring communities. The House of Stars expanded its objectives, beginning to teach traditional techniques for living with drought. The partnership with the university resulted in effective medicines, bringing recognition and benefits to the community. The years passed. Vittoria, who had arrived as the drought, became known as Mother of Water, the one who finds life even in stones. Maria Zina grew up combining traditional knowledge with university medical education. Raphael became a respected leader, representing the community in regional meetings. On a May afternoon in 1977, 30 years after her arrival, Vittoria sat under the umbu tree, watching children play. Beside her, Joachim rested in silence, his hands intertwined with hers. "I thought I was going to die here," she said, breaking the silence, "and ended up finding life." Joachim squeezed her hand. "You not only found life, you brought it to all of us." She smiled, feeling the warm breeze caress her face. In that piece of land that once seemed like her exile, Vittoria put down roots deeper than any tree. When she finally joined the ancestors on a full moon night, she was buried beside Joachim. On her grave, Maria Xenia planted an aruera tree. Here rests Vitalina, who was not born of this land but made it fertile with her love. She did not bear children from her womb, but generated life in every gesture of care. And so Vittoria's legacy continued to flourish, because in the end, as she always knew, it is not the womb that makes a mother, but the constancy of caring,